What's the deepest, darkest secret you know that isn't your own? I'm late, but I guess my story qualifies for this topic. Some time ago, one of my best friends found out that his mother was raped by a guy he knew. The rape happened like 30 years ago. My friend told me he's gonna kill the guy. Few months after that, I found out the rapist was declared missing and they never found him. I'm pretty sure my friend killed him. Vanilla Ice is the father of one of my cousins. He was on tour in the area and apparently my aunt had a thing with him after a gig. My cousin looks just like a female version of him and nothing like her sisters. Nobody mentions why she looks different, and I only found out because my mum told me when she was drunk at a family party years ago. Wait, so that means your cousin is an ice baby. It's thanks for the first gold. I know a guy that smothered his infant brother when he was 4 years old. Parents still think it was SIDS. Holy shit. That's awful. A woman I knew only married her boyfriend just so her ailing mother could see her married before she died. Then she got pregnant by the dude's best friend and divorced the poor lad to be with his best friend. Straight out of a soap opera. I still feel for the dude, and it's been 6 years. My mother's stepfather raped her several times and molested her from the time he married my grandmother until mom moved out. My grandmother knew. But because the abuser was so good to her, aka gave her his paychecks and took her out a lot, she ignored it. When mom confronted her, around age 12, about it, she told my mother it was her fault for being such a SLT and nice girls don't get touched by grown men. Grandma told the family the same thing when I admitted to being molested to my parents and they went to the police. The bitch told our entire extended family what had happened and that I must have been begging for it because nice girls don't have those things happen to them. TL. DR. My grandmother is a monster. Maybe you should slyly mention that nice old women don't slip down the stairs on accident. Local family in a very small place I used to live. From ethnic minority. Find their daughter has been sexually assaulted by local guy. They start asking around for contract killers and, plausibly, considering how indiscreet and hapless they were about it, find one. The molester's death, just days later, is ruled as suicide. Everyone who knew him knew he didn't have a gun and didn't have suicidal tendencies. Even the coroner doesn't seem concerned that he managed to shoot himself in the side of the head. Twice. Nothing ever comes of it. I know what happened. And why. And I've decided to keep my peace. Two of my good friends, one guy and one girl, were both repeatedly raped as children by the pastors of their churches. Same state. Different churches. The girl's pastor was her father. No one else knows. A former co-worker I'd known for about half an hour told me about an inoperable tumor on her spine that keeps her in constant pain, so she's always doped up on pain meds. It also causes incontinence. So she wets the bed almost every night. I was born with one of those faces that says, "Please tell me something incredibly personal I have no idea how to appropriately respond to." It's an uncomfortable honor. My granddad was recently buried, but before that my mum told me that he sexually abused her when she was younger. She told her nan, who beat her for lying. Apparently he also abused my older sister, but she doesn't recall this and it's nothing we can talk about. Backup account for anonymity. I know a guy that was going to break up with his girlfriend one night after a date. He was dropping her off at home. They walked in to find her dad dead on the floor. So he didn't break it off. 35 years later, they are still married. And that's the story of how I almost never existed. That twist ending. A friend of mine has a daughter. His wife doesn't know. My dad and mom had me on prom night. Obvious accident. He was 15, she was 17. By the time I was born they were both a year older and almost broken up. They seriously considered aborting me but ended up waiting too long anyways. They don't know I know. I mean, I don't care. It was 20 years ago and I know they love me and don't regret ruining their teenage life because of my existence in the least bit. Edit. I have several pictures that I took of pictures. Sorry, on my phone. If anyone want to see them, just say so. I don't wanna randomly post picture of my wrinkly incubated baby self without provocation. The guy running the local Chinese place is Korean. Not Chinese. The entire place is basically one big lie. Sometimes it keeps me up at night. That my parents were actually smoking crack with baby sister in the bedroom when she started having a seizure. I was only 6 or 7 and at a neighbor's house at the time and thought my sister was just having a weird medical emergency. She was fine and recovered, but it wasn't until years later that my dad confided with me about this during one of his severe bout of depression. My ex-boyfriend from high school's uncle was killed because he passed out drunk on a train track. He got split into almost perfectly center. Vertically. His family won't tell him because they were close. That was 20 years ago. When I was in Vietnam, a fairly popular officer was lost on an ambush. It turned out a few days later he was found by several of his men raping a Vietnamese child and tried, sentenced and executed in the field by his unit. Lots of questions were asked. Not many answers were to be had. Plenty of crazy shit is buried forever in that soil. My father didn't go to Nam, but his best friend from childhood did. Apparently, his friend came back from the war and became a recluse. Refused to go anywhere, talk to anyone, or do anything. Anything that was normal was out. My father bumped into him almost 10 years after the war. His buddy was drunk at a local bar. My dad asked him, "What happened to you?" His buddy replied, "I played catch using babies. FCK that war." I know numerous guys who were repeatedly and seriously sexually assaulted as kids. One told me directly. One alluded to it repeatedly and left no doubt that it happened. And another doesn't know that I know but would trust me to keep his secret. I know my mom has cancer, but she doesn't tell me because she doesn't want me to worry. So I'm saving up to help her with her bucket list. She doesn't know it, so SHHHH. But I heard her say she wanted to go back to Ireland and at some point see the Vatican. I'd love to just pop up in a cafe she's at and take her to get pampered. So now you know my secret. Don't tell mom. A close friend of mine drunkenly confessed to me the details of his first sexual experience. The story went that when he was around the age of 14 and his brother around 13, they would frequently masturbate together. In the grand scheme of things this wouldn't be so weird. But it eventually progressed to jacking each other off. And then to his little brother f-king him in the ass. Supposedly it happened a few times. And each time they both acted like one thing just lead to another. They're both in their mid-20s now and supposedly never acknowledge it. Knowing this makes me wonder how many people really do participate in voluntary incest. And are just too ashamed to ever tell anyone. My buddy's brother got a DUI and his license taken. His brother proceeded to hide it from his wife for 2 weeks. They went on a family vacation. A situation came up where he needed a license. And everything melted down. He was drunk. Tried to throw himself overboard. And ended up in the ship's jail. His wife left with the kids. My buddy has been driving his brother around for 2 months because an expensive part on his car went and he doesn't have the extra $sign to fix it right now. Ship's jail equals the brig. My once best friend has a secret tryst with her father. She sleeps with him and he provides her with all the utilities, college tuition, and money to spend. Her mother knows that her father was cheating on her and their marriage was ruined because of adultery. Nonetheless, she doesn't know who the real homewrecker is. A good friend of mine's first sexual experience was with his mom. While his stepfather taunted him that he wasn't a real man unless he came. He was 9 years old at the time. TLDR. My friend is a real mothfker. And it's tragic. Fake names used. This story starts in the 1940s. Leela gets engaged to Edward. But her younger sister, Wanda, entices Edward and runs off with him and they get married. A daughter, Tess, is born. But things don't last long for Wanda and Edward and they divorce. Wanda later marries Jim. Tess, the daughter, reaches the age of 15. And Jim begins upping her. Confused, scared and hurt, Tess tells her mother that Jim, the stepfather, has been upping her. Her mother believes her at first but later goes into a state of denial because life as a single mother in the early 1960s is too hard to bear. In fact, the whole thing is too hard to emotionally deal with, so denial comes into play. Tess feels trapped. And she decides that her only escape is to find someone in high school that will get her pregnant and thus end her nightmare. She succeeds. And that's the story of how I was born. It really freaked with my mind for a while when I first learned about it in my early 40s. Late to the party. But my dad was adopted by his uncle and aunt. I never knew about it until I was 19 and my grandmother, my dad's biological aunt, died. After her funeral, my dad sat me down and told me that his real mother had committed suicide and his biological father couldn't handle raising a 5-year-old boy on his own. His bio dad's brother, my grandfather, and his wife couldn't have children. So they decided to raise my dad as their own. I was never allowed to talk about it for fear of hurting my adoptive grandfather. For the 15 years in between the passing of my grandmother and grandfather, we didn't talk about it. One of my best friends cheated on her husband, got pregnant, got divorced, moved to Arizona, live in MN, had the baby, gave it up for adoption. No one knew for a long time. I still don't think her ex-husband knows. The guy who got her pregnant found out and has spent years trying to get in contact with his daughter and has attempted to get custody. All the while, my friend has had contact as it was an open adoption. The family sends my friend birthday cards, flowers, and pictures. Your friend sounds like a piece of work. I know that my first cousin is my sister. Tell your dad that you're in a relationship with your cousin. Tell him that she's pregnant. Tell him that you want to marry her. And you'd want him to be the best man. Watch him sweat. My ex-girlfriend's mate crippled a guy in a fight. Literally broke the other guy's back in a back alley. He never got done for it. I found this out a few years after it had happened. One of my dearest friends was forced to give her babysitter a blowjob when she was younger. 7 or 8, I think. It messed her up quite a bit. She's super Catholic, as she felt it was a terrible sin. I was the first person she told, and that was during her sophomore year of high school. She's happily in a relationship now and shared her first willing kiss with the lucky guy. This thread makes me want to go home and hug my wife and cat. A good friend of mine, who is now deceased for other reasons, once maimed himself dramatically on purpose. He was desperate for money. He was on the local volunteer fire department. While working alone with some of the equipment, he managed to mangle several fingers on one hand. The fingers were amputated and everyone believed that it was an accident. Only myself and my husband at the time, now also deceased, knew the truth. He was awarded some money, though I'm not sure how much. The reason he needed money was because his wildlife rehab was very expensive and he hated that he couldn't help more animals. I miss that man. A good friend of mine acts tough and stereotypically manly all the time. Prides himself on drinking whiskey all the time. Only wears boots. He wore work boots to our F-kin prom, goes hunting. That sort of thing. He has no idea I know he used to do F-king ballet. Edit. I think I offended a couple of people, which was not my intention. It's cool with me if guys to do ballet. I'm just saying that the way he acts and who he is as a guy. He'd be mortified if I knew he did ballet. Like if me or one of his friends picked up ballet, he'd take the piss out of us for it. How else are you supposed to get your calves so well defined, bro? My roommate mentally and verbally abuses and manipulates his girlfriend. It's weird as FCK too. Because he is the biggest PSSY around everyone else. Edit. Yes, I know I should help her. I've talked to her about it. She doesn't want help. She hears this shit all the time from her friends too, apparently. She doesn't want help. There's nothing for me to do. There ya go. MR. Insecure, needs to dominate someone weaker than him. Someone vulnerable. Sad. Since he was probably done the same thing. My friend came over to my house once in complete crisis. After a couple hours of wailing and random phrases, it becomes apparent that she had given birth to a child a few years back. She alludes to the fact that the child is now dead. A while later she tells me that she used to have a drug problem and had left the kid in the care of a couple of other addicts. When she returned from her run, the kid was dead from heat exhaustion. No charges were pressed, she never was convicted of anything and moved shortly thereafter. I put 2 and 2 together that it's possible she never reported it, hid the body. We're going to start seeing this in Tennessee. They passed a law that if a woman gives birth to a crack baby, the woman will go to prison for it. They've already started seeing a rise in children born at home, where they die without the specialized care drug addicted babies need. In school there was this girl who was bullied constantly and had no friends. She was a bit of weirdo, she had no social skills, and her mother was even more strange. I was one of the only kids who didn't bully her and the only one to actually talk to her, but I was no hero. I was too scared of the other kids to actually be friends with her. Anyway, one day, when we were about 11 or 12 years old, she sat alone in a classroom, crying after being bullied. I felt bad for her, so I walked in and tried to comfort her. We started talking, and she told me that her father molested her when she was a toddler, and continued doing so until her parents divorced when she was 10. I never told a soul. I wish I had told someone when she told me, or at least encourage her to tell someone. My co-worker has such a bad gambling problem that she routinely runs out of gas on the highway on the way to and from work because she spent it all casinos. 3 times in the last 4 weeks she has accidentally used the corporate credit card to buy gas for her car and is telling payroll she can pay it back for at least 2 months. I am pretty sure she has lost her apartment as well and is living out of her car. A very well-known and liked guy pulled into the yard at 4 AM. Then backed their truck up behind some trees so it couldn't be seen from the road. When we asked what was going on, they said, "You have to help me. I killed a guy and the cops are looking for me." We talked them into turning themselves in. Apparently he was in a bathroom at a truck stop and a really big guy kicked in the stall door and said, "You are gonna suck my dick." My friend hit him in the face with the ceramic toilet tank lid, and blood went everywhere. Assuming he killed him, he drove off. When the cops arrived, they said that the guy had arped several people in this fashion. My ex has a friend who is living with her boyfriend now, but just before that was prostituting herself through Craigslist during the relationship without telling him. Not for the money, but because she liked the risk and the validation. She is pretty and bubbly. She gave her boyfriend chlamydia and he never thought twice about it. My ex-wife was in an online relationship with a 16-year-old kid she met while playing Call of Duty on Xbox. She led him on to believe that they were a real couple in a relationship. It went so far that they exchanged nude pics of each other. She left me a week after I discovered the relationship, saying that I was too much of an asshole to live with. My family and I know what really happened and are trying to expose her. Possibly the worst thing is that she's an elementary school teacher. My friend let his roommate kill himself via car in the garage. The guy had 2 kids and found out another was on the way from a girl he was dating. My friend caught him trying to do it. The guy told him he would just try again later, so my friend left and let him finish. The local Tea Party candidate dropped out of school after the 8th grade. Spent his entire adult life hosing out septic tanks to support his drug habit. And he has at least 3 bastard children around the state his wife doesn't know about. He's only running for office because his psycho bitch wife is making him. God help us if he ever gets elected. Please do America a favor and blow up his spot in the local media a few weeks before the election. My friend is sorely turned on by dogs and has gotten one off before. She scares me. I had an IT manager working for me who was kind of a nut. He told me his mother had been in the CIA and had a box that he was told never to open until her death. She told him that foreign agents were after him to get to her. And that when he was in China teaching IT, some guy came into his classroom and told him he had to talk to his mother, who told him he had to leave the country. I didn't really believe him at all. But shortly after, our payroll department got a letter from the Social Security Administration ordering us to change his name and SS.